So because of this, there is a different approach, which is not action research, but it actually has a different focus and it seems much more feasible for your type of research. And it's called design science. Who knows what's the design science? Or heard about the design science before? Okay. Design science says that instead of focusing on changing the social entities like organizations, stakeholder relations, regulations, institutions, think about focusing on a particular artifact. Artifact can be an object, can be a little piece of business process, can be configuration of a technology, something that you can change and design it. And instead of thinking about making a real change and engage in a real dynamic of an organization platform, think about putting this design into a validation context, a pilot context. Let me give you an example. You want to know that if virtual reality is used by marketing agents of large companies for engaging the potential customers in the show of the products, does that multi-sensory engagement change the perception of the customers, for instance? Action research means you go and find one of those big companies, you talk to the commercial division, you actually arrange for them using a virtual reality instrument, you go and help them to implement that, you go and observe and reflect on how their use of this actual virtual reality in their actual marketing practices will impact the actual reaction of the potential users. That's the action research. You may say, well, that's too much. I can't have it. You can go to the design science and say, well, wait, I still can do a version of that action research by taking it into a pilot. I focus on certain design options. I can find a template, open source, trial, virtual reality gadget. Maybe in the innovation lab course or somewhere else. And I can actually create a similar setup of users' engagement. I can act as the marketing agent. I can use this virtual reality. I can recruit some of my friends or family members or others who are similar to a potential customer, ask them to come and engage with this virtual reality. And then I change those parameters in the virtual reality device to see their impact. Let's say more visual interaction or audio interaction or other things. So I design a setup, design an artifact, and then I put it into the science of testing how it works. And my implementation is not for the aim of solving the problem, is for the aim of testing and checking how it works. Therefore, similar to the action and research cycles, you have the design cycle and you have the validation cycle. In the design cycle, you use the literature, you use your intuition, you use your understanding of the problem to suggest a design of a way of using VR for marketing, design of a chatbot, design of kind of social interaction, design of a certain ways of diagnosing with or without having the input of the algorithm. So you design an artifact for the aim of understanding and checking and validating if that works. And then you put it into a validation cycle. If you only do the design and you finish your thesis, you would be well qualified for engineering departments. Even there, may not. For the University of Applied Sciences, because there it's more about ideation. Here you are doing a scientific research, even for prescription. You need to design and put it into a test. So let's just get one interesting example of that. Go to the Canvas under lecture 7, module lecture 7, you see a few examples of design science. One of them is the thesis of Carla. From DBI 2 years ago, she used design science. Open the PDF, the thesis. Quickly read the abstract, see what is the idea of the research. What is the question that she wants to answer? What's the problem? The existing chatbots are capable for short answer, question answer. Short phrases, questions, short phrases, answers. What she wants to actually contribute to, enhance, and improve is developing a chatbot that is capable to have deeper conversation. And in this case, deeper conversation means longer sentences. For instance, longer period of back and forth, not after 2-3 iterations stop. No, continue and ask follow-up questions. So this is the thing that she wants to improve in terms of the design of the chatbots. How does she design? What does she design actually here? Go to the method section. Section 4.4. So what does she make as the intervention, as a design? Point of change. The wording, the linguistic input of the chatbot. Instead of having a library of short phrases, she pushes the long phrases, the long wordings, more complex conversations, to see how does that impact. How does she go with the validation? Okay, she suggests a design of the chatbot. How does she make sure that the design is effective, is working, the medicine is useful? Where do you see the proof of solution, the validation proof? So she implements this manipulated version, and then the two versions, the baseline, the manipulated version of the chatbot. She puts it into the conversations, different conversations. And then she looks at certain outcomes, the number of words in the conversation, the length of the conversation, for instance, and sees if any of them has been changed or improved as a result of this new design. Who may say that this is actually an experimental research? It's not a design science. Or what's the difference between design science and experimental research? Let me ask a simpler question. What's the difference between action research and experimental design? Important arguments of people doing action research is that they say we don't go to the lab, we go to the reality. That's the power of action research. So Yemi, if you go to the real case, then people can't come back and say, no, this was just a lab. No, you say that was the reality. But then design science seems a kind of pilot and lab. Can we use experimental design combined with the design science? Okay, think about that. A couple of quick checks. Is it clear the difference between action research and design science? Who thinks that I maybe use a design science approach, but I'm not sure, and I would like to discuss it just briefly here? Let's think along with Luke and see how he can turn his own topic into a design science design. First, you need to think about what is the problem, what is the issue. I think the adoption of digital innovation.
Yes.
Therefore, if you want to measure it or see how it has been improved, the pace of adoption or the scale of adoption, the depth of adoption, these are the things that you need to think as outcome to be improved, to check if you have been effective in terms of your prescription. Step one. Step two, you need to think about the artifact. What is the thing that you want to actually suggest as a way of improving these outcomes? Perfect. So you need to start working in the first cycle, which is the design cycle, to design your roadmap. This design cycle As it is indicated in this figure, for that, like this middle part, the upper side, when you're developing, you're designing your artifact, you need to get the input from the case. How is the construction industry? What are their work? What type of digitalizations they are dealing with? How their work is managed? Who are the managers? How much power they have, and all these things. And you also need to rely on the existing literature. So anyone before tried to suggest any roadmap for adopting digital innovation? Probably yes. How was their roadmap suggested? Because if I want to actually create a new medicine, I don't start from scratch. I go and look at the existing medicines, the existing pills, and check how they have been performing so far, and then I try to improve them. So you look at the existing literature and you see that there are a few ideas, suggestions in terms of the roadmap. The starting point, how many steps, what are the steps, what is the end point, the transitions, and you get those inputs. And then you design your own roadmap that you want to, for instance, customize for the industry or customize to this particular issue or improve in any way that you think should be improved. This is your roadmap, your artifact. Number two, it can be the description of certain things. You have done this design cycle. Now it comes to the validation. Well, in the action research way, you could go to the company, but now you need to find a way to validate it. You may think of a focus group, for instance. Bring together 4, 5, 6 managers from the construction industry, put them in a Zoom meeting, and just put them in a situation. Imagine you want to improve the adoption of a particular digital innovation. I am suggesting you this particular roadmap. How do you think about it? So you are not actually implementing, but you are finding a way to use the expert panels to simulate how it may work if they implement that in the reality. It's not the real implementation, it's a kind of mental implementation, mental simulation. Thinking about the platform and improving the engagement of the complementers on a game platform by changing certain configurations, in the validation, you may use a simulation technique. You say, I don't implement it on any of the real game platforms. I use a simulation to see how it may work. And then it would be your validation cycle. You get feedback, and this is much more than, let's say, not implementing or not validating it at all. I think any of the topics we can think and play with that to see. There are many ways to design, there are many ways to validate. Experimental validation, focus group validation, interview validation, survey validation, but they are for the validation purposes. I put a few good examples on the Canvas page from both action research and design science. Read them carefully. You see different flavors, both in terms of the design and in terms of the implementation. And even if you don't do any of these two, design science or action research, formally, learn the principle of change and intervention for designing your research. Even if you are doing the classic case study, still in your interviews, you may ask some triggering questions. You may confront the managers with a particular scenario and then see how they reflect on that. I mean, this is anyways a powerful way to think about what can I actually think in terms of an intervention in my research setup to get some useful insights back. So I think we already discussed the points.